when I was selling residential real estate, rates were at an all-time low.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a ton of context on that. I just knew that was the tagline.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think that most people understood.
Yeah.
Now at 8%, 9%, it becomes crystal clear what the sales pitch was back then. Index funds lagging, crypto go bust. Your portfolio is begging for something that actually pays. Self-storage, recession-proof, boring, relentless. Go to vondicapital.com to learn more. I'm really digging this jam. Really wets the whistle. It's cold out there today, James.
Yeah.
Welcome back to
Windy.
the studio. Windy? Is it windy out there?
Windy, very.
Try not to go outside. Welcome back. Control Alt Invest. I'm Jason Bonnersmith here with my co-host, James Goodwillie. James, how's it going?
Good. Good. Going well.
You really like that jam, I can tell.
Yeah. It's my favorite.
Yeah. So it is cold out, but spring's coming.
Almost. Yep. Things
Yep.
are sprouting.
Yeah. That means what? Chores, grass cutting, clean up,
Yeah.
spring cleaning.
Oh, yeah.
Do you go it alone?
The yard work?
All of it, yeah.
Yeah. My wife likes yard work, so she helps a lot. She doesn't mow the lawn. That's where she draws the line, and I have to cross that line. But that's probably about the main thing, yeah.
I don't think I've cut the yard in 2 years.
Catherine does it?
Catherine likes to do it.
Okay.
But
But you got a riding mower, right?
well, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a little bit more fun.
Listen,
than
when you're as wealthy as I am, you have a riding mower, okay?
Yeah, that's right. Excuse me.
But also Brooks. Brooks cuts the yard.
Oh, that's nice.
Only we have to give it this. We have to cut in.
Yeah.
He's not there yet on the
Edging.
edging.
Yeah.
But he likes driving the thing back and forth. I tell you what, that kid can't cut a corner of grass to save his life. So I start it.
Yeah.
Either me or Catherine will start it. He'll back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
He'll turn 5 yards too early. So when he's done, I tell him, good job.
Yep.
He goes and plays with his friends, and then I just zigzag cutting the corners that he missed.
That's pretty good. That's not bad.
It's not bad. I'll tell you what it does is it frees up time. That one,
For sure.
I'm not feeding him.
Yes.
2, I don't have to cut the grass.
Mm-hmm.
And then he likes it because he's on a machine.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess to drive something automatic.
That's right.
That's cool.
Did you have a riding mower when you were a kid at least?
No.
No.
No. Oh, yeah. I had just a super old, I think it was, my dad had a Sears lawnmower, back when Sears was the thing.
Oh, Sears. I thought
Yeah.
you said serious.
No. Like an old Sears lawnmower that,
Push.
yep, push. Definitely, yeah, definitely not automatic.
Pull start.
Yep.
At least it wasn't the spinning blades from the 50s. That
Yeah.
was a step up.
Yeah, that's true. A
What-
Sith, is that what they're called, right?
I think
The
it
big-
is.
The big, giant,
Oh,
curved blades that you would cut with.
yeah. I ran my dad's tractor into his new white car. He had an orange tractor case, and he had a new white Grand Mercury. Again, speaking of massive wealth.
Yes.
And we had a hill, and I got out of control. I slammed the tractor into the car.
Oh.
So that was fun. But he took it like a champ. He wasn't mad.
But
he was probably leveraging me to free up some time for him. We had a big yard when I was a kid. It wasn't a big house, but it was like,
yeah.
I think back then when they built houses, they were happy to give you a yard.
Yeah.
Now, now they're like, how close can I get this one house to the other?
Yeah.
But what they're doing, there's a theme here
Mm-hmm.
that's emerging. They're leveraging the amount of space they have to develop on, those builders. And
For sure.
They're smart cats.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like to ask you what we're going to talk about today, even though, wink, wink, I know what we're going to talk about.
Yes.
That's a podcasting trick for the uninformed. But today we want to talk about leverage
Mm-hmm.
because this is an important topic.
Mhm.
I think when we are, again, pushing the reset button on what most people think of finance and wealth building and all that, this is a hot topic. You get people who have been raised in a certain way that maybe don't fully understand the power of it, power of leverage. And so today's going to be fun to dive in on different ways to use leverage.
Or they don't even know necessarily what it is, right? I feel like it's one of those buzzwords that everyone talks about especially in the business world. They always talk about leverage and things. I feel like a lot of people, especially when I was younger, right? You would hear that word, and for some reason I would always associate it with like a politics thing or something, right? Like I have the upper hand on you, and like I have some cards in my hand that I know you don't have, and that's leverage, right? Having a kind of the upper hand. And that's not it, right? So I think it'll be good to like demystify that word a little bit as well too.
Cool. That's a great place to start. So if you had to explain leverage to somebody, what's the TLDR?
I think it'll be using resources, whether that's time or equipment or processes or whatever, to impact the final outcome, hopefully in a positive way. So that could be, using a resource of someone else's money to make yourself more money faster than you would just using your own money. It could be, saving time in the lawn mowing instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most people don't know, or, you mentioned leveraging other people's money. I think where most people get their start, or a lot of people get their start, I mean, it's the home mortgage. That's your first almost leverage point where you want to gain an asset. Most young people don't look at it as an asset. They're like, I want a home for my family. I want to build a family. Mm-hmm. Also, most people don't have, God, what is it now? 600,000 for a starter home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people don't have that cash to go and pay. So what do? You get a mortgage.
Right.
A mortgage is creating leverage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You put a certain amount of your own money down as like a good faith, and then a bank or a lender gives you the leverage you need to buy the house.
Yeah. So you take, instead of owning an asset for $500,000, mm-hmm. you can put $100,000 down, put 20% down.
Or less.
If you can. Mm-hmm. Yes, the less you put down, the more leverage you gain. Mm-hmm. But now for that $100,000, you are in control of a $100,000 asset. Mm-hmm. You are entitled to any capital gains, or it's not capital gains, but appreciation that the house gets.
Yep.
The bank says, all right, you can have that. I'm going to take the interest. And we all know that's wild at this point. Or maybe you got in when rates were low. I don't know if I've told you this, but I sold residential real estate for a while. Mm-hmm. And this is actually an interesting story. So I talked before about doing mutual fund accounting.
Yeah.
I saw that going absolutely nowhere. Mm-hmm. I knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, something on my own. It was one day I was driving down the road and I saw a sign for like real estate classes. I was like, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Long story short, to make that transition, it's kind of hard to, I guess it seemed hard to me. Maybe it's not. In retrospect, I guess it's not that hard to just go get a real estate license and try your hand.
Sure.
At the time, it felt very hard. But what I ended up doing was leveraging a network that I had. And I started telling people, here's what I want to do. Through that sort of self-advertising, I made a connection to a broker that needed to hire someone with a license, and that was me. And so that's another example of using leverage. But where I was going with that was when I was selling residential real estate, rates were at an all-time low.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a ton of context on that. I just knew that was the tagline. Mm-hmm. And I really don't think that most people understood.
Yeah.
Now at 8%, 9%, it becomes crystal clear what the sales pitch was back then.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think the rates in general, like anytime that they go up and down or down and up really, really fast, it makes people hyper aware. Right. And I think the longer that the rates stay at 6 or, 5, even if they drop to the 5s or go up to 7s or something, as long as they stay within this realm, I feel like the general public's attention span will kind of forget almost what it used to be. And over time, people will just be like, oh yeah, this is the normal. This is the new normal, right? That famous word or phrase. I mean, but yeah, it's crazy when rates roller coaster that aggressively, how many people especially in today's market are just stuck because, I'm not gonna go get less of a house for more money.
Yeah, that's true. Now, how does, I guess real quick before we move on, can you explain to me what rising rates do for leverage?
It just gives you less leverage to a certain extent, I'd say. You're paying more on interest, which means the way that you qualify for a mortgage, for those of you that have one, you'll know this, people that don't, is they look at kind of your debt to income, right? How much are you bringing in? And so how much can you afford? And it's all based off of a percentage, right? Depending on what type of loan product and mortgage that you're looking to get. When they look at that, they'll give you a percentage, and factored in on that percentage in order to qualify you is that interest. And so the higher the interest rate, the higher that monthly payment is going to be, which makes your debt to income ratio a lot worse. When rates were 3%, let's say, 2020, 2021, 2022, when they were 3%, maybe you made $100,000 a year, you could qualify for $400,000 home, let's say. Now that rates are where they are, let's say in that amount of time, you've bumped up to $140,000, but because rates are now 6%, 6.5%, now you can only qualify for a $300,000 home.
Yeah.
Even though you make more money, the bank's giving you less leverage.
I think this transitions nice into what I think a lot of people, when they think of their mortgage, they don't go, okay, I'm leveraged 3-to-1, 4-to-1, whatever it is.
Right.
They go, I have debt.
Mhm.
I have to make this payment. And if they're brave, they look at the breakdown of the payment and they say $10 goes to principal, $1,500 has gone to interest.
Right.
And that's scary. And it should be scary. Financially speaking, if you look at it as leverage, you go, okay, this sucks in the short term for this interest. But as the house appreciates year over year, generally real estate goes up. Depending who you ask, it only ever goes up.
Right.
You make that money back, or you at least profit enough to cover that expense.
Sure.
So I guess where would you draw the line between here's some debt versus I'm just leveraged?
I would just appreciating versus depreciating assets. I would argue that when you buy a car, that's also leverage, right? You're taking money that you have, and then typically sometimes you can put 0% down, but taking money that you have, pairing it with some leverage from a lender in order to buy a car that you don't have the actual cash for. Maybe you do, but a lot of people will look at, and this is probably a different episode, but a lot of people will say like, oh, interest rates 1.99% for 5 years, 6 years. I'd rather keep that money in the market or in, whatever. So they use leverage of somebody else's money at a low interest rate because they're making a lot more money on that money somewhere else, a lot higher rate of return. But the car value goes down. So it's like not the greatest, whereas at least with a house, to your point, it could go down for a period of time. Ultimately, it's going to continue to go up.
Yeah.
A trend up.
Yeah. What a great point. And I think there's two ways to look at it. And I completely agree with you. That's what I was thinking about too, was like a car loan. Mm-hmm. You're taking on some debt. You make a monthly payment. And so you might say, I have actually a very good friend of mine. She's always been fiscally very responsible. Mm-hmm. I don't know her breakdown of like where she kept her money, but cash heavy and like when she bought a car, she bought the car.
Yeah, cash.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think there's certainly benefits to that. You own the car, maybe your insurance is cheaper, maybe you have less to worry about, you don't have that monthly payment. But what you said there is critically important when thinking about wealth building. We've talked before about money as a weapon and using money as a weapon. Sure, you're paying interest on that car, but if you can take that $600 a month, $500 a month, whatever your car payment would be, or I'm sorry, not the $600 a month, the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, mm-hmm. instead of handing that over to a car dealer, if you do that slowly, you do your down payment and your $600, $500 a month, whatever your car payment is. Maybe that's skewed. Maybe most people would say $200-$300,
right?
Whatever your car payment is. Now you have that 10, 20, $30,000, and maybe it is a Bitcoin investment. Maybe you are trading options because you know what you're doing, but you get to keep that money in the short term, and that inherently is you're creating leverage for yourself.
Right. Yeah. On the opposite side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think these are important topics. Let's do this because this was fun last time. We liked, we acknowledged going in on people and things, right? You hate America. Totally kidding. You hate Dave Ramsey.
Yep. Dislike. Yeah, for sure.
Not kidding. We did acknowledge his sort of shtick on expenses versus income. But he's probably the most prominent person that, you say debt, you're saying the devil. It's the worst thing ever.
Sure.
If you were sitting down with him or somebody who kind of had that line of thinking on debt, I guess, what is your counter argument for using debt for good?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the speed at which you can accumulate wealth is the bottom line, to me at least. I think Dave Ramsey, he'll like diversify kind of his message a little bit, and by saying only pay cash or you must pay cash for anything depreciating, right? Cars, a refrigerator, right? Things that aren't going to go up in value. And so he will, he's big on the fact that like credit scores are a scam, and I don't disagree with that, but he won't tell you go buy a house in cash necessarily. If you take his messaging to the extreme, that's what a lot of people that have gone through his program and a lot of people that listen to him a lot, that's kind of how they look at things of like, I'm not buying another home until I could buy it in cash, or I'm not going to go buy a rental property unless I can buy it in cash. I think that's fine if you want to do that and you don't have any interest payments, you don't have anything like that, and the rental property will go up in value or your home will go up in value, which is great. How fast can you get to that point? And I think that's, we only live a certain amount of years.
Yeah.
And so the goal of, the American dream is, you work hard, then you retire, right? And hopefully during that time that you're working, you make as much money as possible. In order to do that, I think that's where leverage comes into play. How quickly can you make that money, right? If I want to buy a $100,000 home, I could put 10% down, get a mortgage. And if that home goes up a certain percent, let's say 10% over the course of 5 years, that's awesome, right? What is that, 110,000 now?
Yeah.
And I put 10,000 down. So once I pay off the remainder of the loan, when I go to sell my house in 5 years, I get whatever principal I've made back all through those payments, which is not a lot at that point. But then I get to walk away with $20,000.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of the $10,000 I put in, which is great. You just made $10,000 off of $10,000. If you were to buy that in cash, how many years would it take you to save that $100,000 to go buy it in cash? Right. Maybe it is 5 years, or maybe it's less. But maybe it's 20 years. Right. Maybe it's especially people with families, and the world's expensive. And so I think that's the beauty of leverage and kind of the pro and con that you have to weigh out.
I think it's a very interesting conversation from the perspective that, and we're sort of focusing on residential real estate here with mortgages and appreciation.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest example for people to get off the bat.
Yeah, and I want to pivot here in a minute to other maybe non-traditional ways of using leverage. We've talked some of it already, but what I think is interesting with where we're going as a country, as a society, with specific to housing, is there were government programs, the Freddie Macs, the Fannie Maes, the Ginnie Maes, in the, I don't know what year it was, 60s, 70s, 80s, something like that. The government recognized that home ownership was a positive thing for society. They wanted people in communities to have that sense of feel, that sense of community. So these sort of government-backed securities and making sure that the mortgages were protected, these programs that they did, that was to entice people to become homeowners and build community.
Sure.
That I don't think we talked about how the stock market has changed. I think nowadays that sort of community building and putting that in your home is different. most young people, one, it's by necessity. Young people cannot afford a house.
Yeah.
With both interest rates and the ridiculous cost of housing.
Yes.
So now rentals are more common. People are like, why am I going to put this chunk of change into a house when I can rent an apartment and I can rent a storage unit, and that's so much cheaper, and then I can still live my life. I can travel and all that.
Yeah.
So maybe, I guess, what are your thoughts there on, we talked how the most common way is most people, they gain leverage from their mortgage, but that certainly seems to be shifting. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think people are looking, to your point, people are looking at all the different ways and things that they can leverage. Not just that one particular, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to have kids, I'm going to max my 401k, things like that in order to build wealth. They're looking at it from not just wealth, they're looking at it from time. They're looking at it from like happiness, right? How can I leverage certain things in order to bring me more happiness? And so to your traveling point, right? There's the digital nomad space,
Yeah.
Where it's like, if you're a young person, and even people nowadays with kids, I want to travel the world. I have a remote job. I could do it from wherever. I don't want to be stuck in my house. I want to go rent. So they leverage that aspect in order to travel the world and rent in snippets and go live for a year in Bali and then go live in, the south of Spain or, wherever.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. And some people do it really well. Some people do buy a house and then they turn that into a rental and then leverage the income they're making from that rental in order to go live that digital nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just the ways that people are looking at leverage now and saying, maybe there's other factors.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked last time about like that hustle culture and grind here, grind there.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about it, but house hacking, that's another thing they like to advertise is, buy a house, rent a room. And again, they're not bad ideas. It's, it's all on what you're trying to accomplish. And again, you're gaining leverage. So if we're talking maybe more non-traditional ways of gaining leverage, we talked about gaining leverage on your time. I like to think about if you hire a house cleaner, right? That's 1 or 2 hours you get back on your weekend.
Sure.
You mentioned lawn care. If you hire that out, and I think this is an important topic. And there have been not even in your personal life, but I know of people who have started businesses. They were drowning in tasks.
Yeah.
I have to do this, then I have to do this. I have to hire this person. But a lot of people, when they go into business for themselves, they only trust themselves.
Yes. It's their baby.
Yes. There is a book, the title's escaping me. It talks about really gaining leverage in your business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's anything that's a repetitive task, hire that out.
Yeah.
Hire that out and you can focus on the more important things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's a clear line between how you're going to do that in your personal life and how you're going to do it in your business.
Mm-hmm.
In business, I think it makes a ton of sense because you're gaining, that is essentially leverage. You are leveraging other people's time and skills so that you can focus on maybe growing your business or whatever.
Right.
So those are a couple examples I can think of. And it maybe even drawing the line to like, you're just being resourceful. Like I talked about some job changes. There was a point in time where I worked for 5 different companies in like a 2-year span.
Right.
Some of it was by necessity.
Mm-hmm.
One of the companies that I worked for was like, we're not doing well.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But it's, and even like if you're going from, my wife, she went from an accountant to a nurse.
Right.
And for her, it was a lot of, that's sort of like, I need the nursing skills. I
Sure.
have to go to school. I have to learn biology.
Right.
But if you're doing it, maybe something with less hard skills, you're being resourceful. You're using different educational tools. You're teaching yourself. You're meeting people who are doing it. I sort of rambled on there, but what is I guess maybe what are some things where you've gained leverage or you've seen leverage being used outside of like monetary?
Yeah. I'd like to go back and touch on the point that you mentioned earlier of like, a lot of people only think, especially starting their own business or owning their own business or even in the general workplace, like sometimes people just think I'm the only one that can do this. Right. And the famous saying is like, it's your baby. So you feel so attached to it that you're the only one that's qualified to do it. And I had a mentor, a previous startup that I started years ago. I had a mentor that told me, it was right after I had my son, my first kid, and he asked me, because I was the same way. I was like, it's too expensive. I don't want to spend that money. I could be using it, and I'll put in more hours. I'll do more of this. I'll do more of that. He said to me, do you send your kids to daycare? And I said, yeah. Why? And he goes, that's your actual baby. You're outsourcing your actual baby. So why wouldn't you outsource this one? Why wouldn't you outsource and delegate certain tasks, use leverage to have other people do things that you're just doing because you have to, but it's just time.
Yeah.
It's not bettering your business. It's not bettering the things that you bring to the table. So you have to, assess that of what do I do better than anyone else?
Yeah.
It's not payroll.
Yeah.
Right. It's not compiling paperwork for compliance or taxes. Right. That's not what you do the best.
Yeah.
It's sales. Maybe it's marketing, right? Maybe it's product design or engineering or whatever it is. That's what you do best. So do more of that. And then everything else, use leverage to delegate, get it off your plate, regardless of the cost, because the more that you do of the things that you're good at, the more money that will come to the table.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately. And it was incredible advice. And I think that's an incredible point.
I love that. And we're at risk of going off the rails here, but I think in a really positive direction. If you're a young person listening to this podcast, I think that the easiest way to gain, what's the word I want to use? Self-worth in your job, whatever your job is, and I think this is really common. A lot of people will be like, my week is full of meetings. I'm on meetings all day long. And I kind of laugh when I hear that nowadays. I think a younger me would have been like, oh man, that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of laugh nowadays, and it's like, just decline the meeting.
Right.
Speaking of piece of advices.
Yeah.
A piece of advice.
Yeah.
Somebody told me one time, when somebody sends out a calendar invite that it has accept and it has decline.
Yeah.
Right. Protect your time.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, where I'm going with this, I promise it all ties together, is that is their worth. And that's an easy path. If I just throw my time at something, if I just show up to this meeting and feign interest, and somebody asks me a question, I have psychological safety at work.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm contributing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not particularly happy at the end of the day because I've had no time to spend in my own thoughts or do it. Like, to your point, what is your greatest skill?
Yeah.
I guarantee you, for the majority of people, sitting in a meeting, either in person or on Zoom, isn't the best use of their time.
Right.
But if you're a young person, that's the easiest win, because maybe you haven't skilled up in a certain area yet. Maybe you're trying to learn from someone else. And grinding in some of those things is fine. But
Sure.
But at some point you have to gain leverage over what you've learned and leverage other people's time. So, like you said, get back to your best skill.
Yeah. And and I think, you from a leverage standpoint, you could take it to the extreme, and you could hire a cleaner. You could hire a personal shopper. You could hire, grocery delivery. You could outsource all of that stuff and leverage that in order to get back time. Going back to like digital nomads and people like that, there's also that aspect that you have to look at of separate from work, especially for the young people out there, separate from work. What are the things that move not your greatest skills in life in the workplace, but your greatest skills in life? Which ones of those should be outsourced and which ones shouldn't, right? Like, if you're a young person and you and your spouse really enjoy cooking together, and it's like, maybe you both have busy jobs, and that's the one time where you guys come together, you have a cocktail, you listen to music, and you kind of decompress and talk through the day. Sure, you could get more time to hustle if you outsource that and just order takeout or whatever every single day. But is it worth it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sure. There's a cost to everything.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, there is no free lunch, right? We like to say that. Let's talk about when leverage goes bad.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about it on a previous episode once with the the fall of the mortgage-backed securities.
Sure.
And that was an example of somebody being over-leveraged.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with long-term capital management?
No.
1998, there's a company called Long-Term Capital Management, and
What a name. What a generic, just broad stroke of a name.
Yeah, who would use capital management in their company's name? Shout out to our sponsor. It was very smart people running a hedge fund. It was I forget what kind of scientist. I'm really good at telling stories. I don't know if you know this.
Like an economist or like a mathematics kind of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. One of the, because I think that we talked about how the stock market has changed. I think it started with math guys coming in and building the models, and that's how they sort of generated this arbitrage in the market. But so let's say it's one of the early people to that, and they built up this hedge fund. It was making a ton of money. They ended up being leveraged 25 to 1. So they had I guess through people's investments, whatever, they had $4 billion in cash. They had $125 billion invested.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So they borrowed over $100 billion.
Either that or through the financial products where you can be exposed beyond your investment.
Got it.
Yep. That was their exposure. And when we talk about leverage, it's almost like the plank on a pirate ship. Small piece of wood, a little bit of leverage.
Yeah.
You can take a couple steps.
Yep.
When that plank gets longer and longer, the smallest event, a gust of wind, the rocking of a wave, you fall off that plank. Yeah. And for all math is one of my favorite things. I love when Brooks comes home and he's got math homework and we're doing division. I love that. I was like, Brooks, you like this? And he's like, yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I love chatting math. And I love that the idea of you take this problem, you apply math to it, and it generates some sort of income.
Yeah.
For all that math, as you keep pushing the boundaries out and out and out, because in any math problem, or math is finite, but in any sort of probability or predictive problem, there is the tail end of the curve, the 0.01%. More and more leverage, those 0.01% grow.
Yeah.
In 1998, it was Russia defaulting on their debt. A market event that caused panic. People wanted out. Being over leveraged, you had to get 25 times your initial money back out of the market. You're now selling into other sellers. Total collapse.
Wow.
And so I bring that up because, again, there is no free lunch. You can leverage yourself. You have to be careful. Believe it or not, hopefully you've listened to all the pods so far, and you'll know where we're going with this. Long-term capital managers was bailed out by the Federal Reserve.
Of course. That whole interconnectivity thing of the worldwide connectivity, American company, American hedge fund, Russia default. That's what does it in.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yep. And this wasn't like in our Too Big to Fail episode, we talked about the Bear Stearns and sort of like, this is a private hedge fund that, they're gatekeeping getting in anyways. You probably needed $1 million to get into this fund anyways.
Yeah.
Still bailed out by the Federal Reserve.
Whoa.
But this would be fun. I'm going to put you on the spot.
All right.
That's obviously an extreme example of financial leverage gone wrong. Walk me through creating leverage in your personal life, and it can go off the rails. I think you touched on it a little bit too, maybe with your personal relationships, if you're like hiring everything out and
Yeah. I mean, the easiest example would be you take it to the extreme and you hire everything out. You have a yard guy that comes to do the lawn. You have a person who, delivers your food. You get takeout every single day. You have daycare, and daycare is expensive. You try and go for everything, right? Like instead of buying a new cell phone, you go on the Apple prolonged pay plan and pay it over time, right? Everything in your life is leverage. Maybe you got a guy that comes and picks up the dog shit in your backyard once a week, right? Like everything in your life is hands off. You are just focused on your time and your time only. And then you get sick, or then you lose your job, or that, or anything in life, right?
Yeah.
If you are way over leveraged, that's it, collapsed. That's kind of a simple example, but I think the more common one would be, let's say you buy a house for $600,000 at 6.5%, and then it's at the very top end of your range. You lose your job, maybe you don't lose your job, but maybe the market goes down.
Yeah.
And then you only put 2% down or something super, super low. Maybe you even did a bridge loan where you took a loan for the down payment and then a loan for the mortgage, right? So you've got two loans, the whole thing's a loan. And then the market goes down. Now your house isn't worth as much.
Yeah.
And then maybe you lose your job and you got to sell it. Over leverage, you lose money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a great point. Even in the car too. If you really want that Lexus and you're over leveraged and then you want out, I need to get out of this car. You can't. You're upside down.
Yeah.
This has been fascinating. I think there's one more topic we should get into, and this might be the most notorious leverage gainer of all time. You ever hear of Tom Sawyer?
Yeah, like Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer.
Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, yeah.
Yeah.
Tom Sawyer got in trouble, as he does.
Yeah.
And he got punished with whitewashing his fence.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to whitewash the fence. And he was smart enough to say, his friends came by, they wanted to play. And he was like, I got to whitewash the fence. They're like, man, that sucks. He was like, does it? He's like, this is awesome. I love whitewashing. They're like, no, you don't. He's like, dude, grab a paintbrush. Look how much fun this is. And I think as it goes, he ended up sitting in a hammock while his friends whitewashed the fence.
There you go. If you're a hell of a salesman, you can leverage yourself out of anything.
That's leverage. Some of it, they might call it reverse psychology.
Yeah.
But it's also very resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
So what's a takeaway? Make all your friends do your work?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it.
Hey, can you bring your mower by next weekend?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Love it.
Control, Alt, Invest.